We're going to look at next water movement in soil. So we got to be able to get the water down and through and around all the pore spaces, and so the first thing we have to look at is pore space. And pore space is simply how much there is as voids within the soil itself. So when we're looking at a given piece of soil, we just assume that it's solid material, but it isn't. There's a whole bunch of holes in that material, and we call that the pore space within the soil. And most good agricultural soils will be anywhere from 30 up to where it's highly cultivated, maybe 60% pore space. Now what can be in that pore space? Well, in that pore space we can have air and we can have water. And we really need a combination of both. We need to have the water, obviously, for the plant to survive, because it takes a lot of water to keep it maintained and alive and healthy. We also need air to create the bacterial transformations that are occurring in the soil and allowing that soil to breathe so that it can provide a good environment for the roots to grow as healthy as possible. Now there are a few plants that will grow with no air in the soil, effectively no air in the soil. And that would be plants like rice, and think of some crops that might be that way. Rice is probably the one that jumps at us the quickest. And what was that?
Don't blueberries grow?
Blueberries, no, cranberries maybe, yeah. And then obviously there's lots of plants that you see in ponds and the like that are that way, that live in water. The word for those are hydrophytes. These cottonwood trees that we're growing could be that way. Willow trees can grow with an awful lot of water, but cypress, some of the different types of trees that are riparian type trees that grow right along the edges of water courses would fall in that category. But most plants, if you keep the soil saturated, they're literally going to drown and they will die. One of the great catastrophes of the great Mississippi flood in the early 90s was that water sat over so much of that country for so long that the big trees that were in that part of the world, after 4 or 5 months of having their roots saturated, they actually died. So we had 150-year-old trees, big maple trees, elm trees, all varieties that couldn't survive. They literally drowned because they stayed underwater for too long. Kind of like a human, you know, we can only handle it for a couple of 3 minutes. Well, a plant can handle it for quite a bit longer than we can, but eventually you will drown the plant if you keep the root zone totally saturated. So we got to have air in there. The roots have to breathe. Also, it helps the microbial breakdown of the nutrients that are going to be absorbed by the plant. Well, we need to maintain a pore space in the soil. The way to find a real poor growing condition is to look anywhere on this campus where people walk across the grass all the time. And they compress it, and they compress it, and they compress it, and they get it trampled down to where nothing will grow up through it. Even if you quit walking on it, you could wait a half a year and go out and look, nothing's going to be growing there. Because it's so compacted, all the porosity has been squished out of the soil. You have totally compacted the soil. There's no room for roots, there's no room for water penetration, there's no room for air or anything. Now it only happens when you have foot traffic, only very shallow compaction. We start putting equipment across property and we farm a piece of ground for 50, 100 years, we develop a thing called a plow pan. Whatever depth the deepest cultivation occurs, right below that there's going to be a layer that's going to be partially compacted. And and it's almost like a hard pan layer. We call it a plow pan. That is created by the years and years of running equipment over that field and never breaking it up below a certain level. And most plows or chisels go down about 7 inches. So you can go out here in a field that has been plowed year after year after year for 100 years, and at 7 inches down, you're going to find a layer of hard, compacted soil, more compacted than the rest of the profile. Now, you only have to dig down through that 2 or 3 inches, you break through it. And you're back into the parent soil the way it was laid out eons ago. And, you know, the soil in general gets its porosity from, one thing would be the freezing and thawing, which expands and contracts the soil, which gives it airspace. All of the little bugs that bore down through it and create holes in the ground effectively. And then all the plant roots that go down through, and then when the plant dies, where the root was, the root decomposes, there's a void in the soil. Or if we till in trash into the soil, like corn stalks or wheat stubble or things like that, we create lots of voids as we plow in or work into the ground a lot of organic material. As it decomposes, it will create lots of pore space within the soil. So we can really keep that soil in pretty good stead.